Welcome to the Jets UK podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Andrews Groves, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, David Wyatt-Hupton and Matthew Merrett. Guys, how are we feeling after that pretty depressing game at this point now?
Pretty brutal, I think, is the only way to describe it. It was not a fun Sunday evening. And I think for the first time this season, I almost reached that point where I just had to go back to that feeling that I was so used to under Adam Gase, where I just kind of checked out and was a bit numb by it all. There was no game plan. They kind of just looked like they turned up, didn't really expect anything to go their way. 53-man roster, and I don't think anyone showed up yesterday. It was bleak performance all around.
David, how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, it was depressing, wasn't it? It was boring. It just wasn't a very good football game to watch, full stop, let alone you have a vested interest in the Jets.
Yeah, both teams were poor, weren't they? Yeah.
Both teams were poor. I mean, Taysom Hill couldn't throw, so instantly that's not overly appealing to a general fan. And then you've got Zach Wilson couldn't throw 5 yards. That's not overly appealing. Not many wide receivers on show. I think Marquise Callaway had his first catch in the third quarter or something. It just was one of those games where, some would say, it's traditional smash mouth football. It wasn't even really that. It wasn't because they could do it. It's because they had to do it because they couldn't throw and we couldn't throw. And it was just a dull game.
It was
a boring game.
Poor quality all around. I mean, I think obviously Alvin Kamara was one of the differences, as he is, because he's a fantastic player. He is the opposite of non-quality. I mean, he's always fun to watch. Not so much against your own team, but you can see how good he is. And on his return, he looked good.
He's on a pitch count, apparently.
Was
he on a pitch count?
Well, that's his version of a pitch count because they're so reliant on him. They're they put Tony Jones out
30 touches.
Well, they put Tony Jones out for a few, and they're like, no, you know what? It's like a pitch count is basically him not doing every snap, but doing 90% of the snaps or something like that. But yeah, that's just how good he is, and he's just one of those guys that he's so talented as a runner and a receiver that you can use him in every single play. He's a true free down back, and a pleasure to watch generally. And it's just it's not nice that he's running against our team, but it's just what it is. I mean, it's just the game was. My feelings about it, it's the first time where the excitement for the youth movement is finished, and I think it's just purely because so many of them were out. Like you no longer have Michael Carter, you no longer have number 2, you no longer have Elijah Moore, and then so there's just a lot of pieces missing from that excitement, and then without people like Corey Davison being in there as well. The quality is going to be there, and Zach's going to struggle. So that's another part of the youth movement. That's not going to be something that you want to watch. And I mean, we'll all remember that throw where he throws into the dirt 5 yards with was it Ty Johnson 5 yards away? Braxton Berrios, right? I mean, there was other things he did well. I think his processing was better generally. I think he made the right decisions. There was no one open for that throw is always going to look terrible. And he needs to improve that so that it's like a 99%, that's basically the 1 in 100 times you see him do that will happen. We're seeing him do it too often. That's the problem. But I think overall, he said after the game, he's seeing the game better. He just has to be more accurate. I think we're seeing that. He's making better decisions. He's against a pretty good defense. And you saw that against our receivers was getting they were getting no separation. I think we really miss people like Elijah Moore, who can, with his ability, he can really craft out a little bit of space for himself and help out on certain plays. He wasn't there. So I think it wasn't great, but I think the team around Zach was also really poor. And it's just I just don't know at this point how productive it is to really go too much about him. I don't know. You shoot. I've got some thoughts about it in terms of how it relates to what we've seen with other QBs in the past, both in our team and others. But do you want to say something, Matt?
Yeah, I've obviously been a big Zach fan throughout the season, but for me that was his worst game of the season so far. And I know the stats you can point at stats and how he played against the Patriots and Denver and some of these other games where he's done. But at least in those games, you saw moments and the flashes and kind of the confidence, and he was still there. Yesterday, he looked a bit just in his own head, a bit shaken, a bit rough, a bit hesitant, and all of these things which he becomes his own worst enemy almost. And you have to kind of go back to his year at BYU this time last year, and he was playing with so much confidence and anticipation and just belief in himself that he was one of the best players on the pitch. Any pitch he stepped onto, he could dominate. And he just seems to have lost all of that mojo that kind of made him who he was, and that swagger. And you go back to the night that the Jets drafted him, and I can't remember, but one of the commentators on the draft night said the reason the Jets fell in love with him was his confidence and his swagger. And all of these things which kind of have been spoken about as part of who he is, because he is kind of a quarterback who plays on confidence, which I think is only natural when you're a rookie quarterback coming into the league. And he just seems to have been sucked out of him. And for that reason, on the eye test, I just never felt like Zach Wilson got going last night. He felt lethargic, sloppy, inaccurate, all of these things, and it wasn't a good offensive performance at all. And we can say the same things about the wide receivers and the tight ends and the running backs who let him down as well. It wasn't just Zach Wilson letting his team down in the same way. I guess if you go back to the Patriots game where Zach Wilson probably did let the team down and was the worst player yesterday. Just everyone was bad. But your quarterback, you're picked number 2 for a reason. You are the central figure on offense. You touch the ball on every play. You have to kind of raise the game. And for that reason, I just felt like I never, even when we were, 16-6 down, 13-6 down, before they kind of pulled away with that Taysom Hill touchdown, I'd never even felt like we were getting back into it from those points, because he just didn't look himself yesterday. And perhaps this is part of the rookie struggles, but for the first time yesterday, I kind of had to pause for thought, and those kind of doubts and stuff started creeping in a little bit yesterday, because I do think that was his worst performance of the season so far.
Right. I mean, Dave, I disagreed with you on our group chat, and I still do. Overall, I don't think it was a good performance at all. I think even his return performance against the Texans, he was worse in terms of some of the things he did. I don't know. I saw a guy that was let down a lot by his teammates, as well as doing a lot of wrong himself. I just felt that the overall, it just wasn't clicking. I think he was also playing very conservatively, because I think they knew going into the game plan was basically don't throw the game away. I think because they knew that the other team were going to be limited with what they had at QB. It was going to be a lower scoring game. And I think that in the game plan was basically just protect the ball. Don't be afraid to, if we have to punt it, we'll get and the defense will try and do what they have to do. I think that was playing into it a little bit, where he was being ultra conservative. He wasn't looking to kind of fit it into windows that weren't there, because they weren't there. The receivers weren't getting for separation. So I think when we look back at the film, it would give us a better idea. Obviously, the All-22 generally does, but I don't know. I at this point, I just feel it's just a bad game from the whole team, and it's not really one that is going to matter overall. I think he did a good job of protecting it, but he was a bit too conservative. David, what's your thoughts overall about Zach?
Yeah, I think mine probably sits in the middle of both of yours. I'm probably not as positive about his progressions as you are, Andre. Andres, I thought, he missed some, and that's why I'm looking forward to seeing the coaches' film, because I think there were some. They weren't open BYU open, but they were probably open NFL open. Okay. Not in the first quarter. Yeah, I thought the first 20, 25 minutes, they literally got nothing. Like, they were getting absolutely nothing, and maybe that did sap his confidence. Mm-hmm. But kind of what I said in the group chat last night is he's just not a receiver-friendly quarterback right now. If you're the number 2 overall pick, it doesn't matter if you're a rookie or not. You've got to place the ball better. Elijah Moore will bail you out, and Elijah Moore has bailed him out a couple of times. There's one last week, I think, that he threw it at his shoelaces, and he picked it up off the dirt and went 30, 40 yards, whatever it was. That's what those kind of guys can do. But if you're playing with the Denzel Mims, if you're playing with Crowder, and people, well, not so much Crowder, that's a bit unfair on Crowder, but on some of the other guys, you have to place the ball better. And so we can kind of say the receivers let him down, and they did to an extent. I mean, Ty Johnson, a couple of his drops were really bad, and they hit him in his hands, and he should catch those. But a couple of them are on Zach. You look at the stat line, it'll say 6 drops. I haven't looked at it, but 6 drops or something like that. And you're like, oh, he was really let down. But they'll count that as if it hit their hands. It doesn't matter if it's a yard behind them and they're reaching behind and it hits them in the hands. They'll count that as a drop. Whereas I don't think that's accurate enough to count that as a drop. I think that's on Zach. He needs to lead his receivers a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's a really hard one to judge, because he didn't have a good supporting cast, and we can't forget that. But at the same time, he did as much damage to them as they did to him.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe that. He's not making the progression that we all wanted to see in these last few games.
Yeah.
And you got to consider we've got the Bucks coming up. And we've got the Dolphins next week. That's a really tough defense to face for a rookie quarterback. So it doesn't get easier. We've got the Bucks. We've got the Bills. I mean, this season is very close to being a very, very disappointing season for Zach.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get away from that. I mean, did LaFleur help him? Again, I think when we watch the coach's film, and I'm going to have to really try and convince myself to watch that, because, my God, sitting through that again is not an appealing thing right now. But how much of it wasn't that? It's hard to tell from the TV coverage because you just don't see if they did get open.
Yeah.
Because what I always thought was he was looking for that deep shot. He was constantly looking for that 30, 40-yard pass, that hero ball. And it just wasn't there. Just take what you can get, keep the chains moving, keep it flowing. And then when he did check down, when it came time to check down, his mechanics were all over the place and he just couldn't do it. I think it was a bouncing ball to Berrios. I think he overthrew Crowder 2 or 3 times, just a little bit high. I think he had one to Ryan Griffin, which it was a pitch and catch, and he bounced it into the dirt.
Yeah. Mm.
Is it psychological? Is it a little bit psychological at this point? Because I can't believe that he can throw a 45-yard dart on the run and not complete a 5-yard pitch and catch.
Yeah.
He's overthinking it.
Yeah. And you've seen him. He has. There was times where he did get the ball on target. Like, there was ones I remember another Berrios one where Berrios went across the formation, and as he was running, he got the ball out to him in motion. He got a first down from that, and it was a nice pass on the money. He also got that one to I think it was Jameson Crowder. It was a pinpoint throw, slightly on the run, but he can get the ball in and out of his hands out quickly. It's just about doing that on a consistent basis. That's the problem, eh? I think at this point we talk about his progression and where we would want to see. I think at some point, and I think we're all guilty of this because we just all want to analyze with and compare him to Sam. Obviously, Sam had his rookie year. We are comparing the rookie years a little bit, and we're hoping Sam came back from the injury. Well, like Zach had an injury and come back, and then Sam was a much better player. He played his best career, to my mind, his best football his career in that last part of his rookie year with some of those great performances. And that doesn't mean Zach's going to be on the same trajectory. That obviously was a false dawn with Sam Darnold. It didn't amount to anything. So do we have to see that again and then hope for a different result? No. I mean, it could be different. It's going to probably end not great because we haven't got Elijah probably for the rest of the season. They probably will say they won't push him back. We obviously got no Corey. We're missing players. So at this point, I think it could be very difficult to get another win. I think it's going to be Jacksonville, and then probably that would be the one shot we get another win, and probably nothing else. And I think some of the things you're saying needs to be done in the off season. Give him a full off season where he's not training for the draft, he's not training for for different offenses and getting ready. He knows what he's in, he knows his team, he knows his players, he knows his offense. He can really roll into that as well as working on the mechanics that is going to make him better in that system. That's the hope. It doesn't have to follow the same trajectory. I think, like you said a few weeks ago, David, I think we're really going to see his true progression. Hopefully, the beginning of next year. I think it's going to have to wait because I think there's just a lot of things that need to be fixed with everything going around him. And, that happened with a lot of QBs. I mean, every QB has a different trajectory. It doesn't mean that they're not going to get there. We know he has all the ability that you could want physically. He just needs to put it together. So I guess I'm being more positive about it. I just don't feel like if you look at the other options, what else do you want us to be? Like I saw, we should have traded for Wentz. Came out of this day. I was like, what? Wentz? What? I mean, so because obviously Darnold's off. Darnold's no longer an argument. Obviously, all the other rookies are struggling. So now we're bringing out Wentz. Well, Wentz is doing great with a former coach of his who's got a great rapport. He might have actually been a failure in this system. So
Wentz has also got one of the best lines in football and the best running back in football as well. So.
Exactly, that kind of helps, and a pretty decent defense as well. So I think it's a bit silly to really put any doubt on Zach in terms of let's just get behind him. We know it's going to be a struggle. Let's just hope for better next year, and we'll be able to hopefully really build more. We've got lots of assets as we know, and we're looking forward to the off season as we know as Jets fans. So I think we just have to accept that it's nothing really is going to change. There's not going to be magical 350-yard game, 4-touchdown game, or that's going to come this year. It's just what it is. And I think we just have to hope that in the off-season, you hope that the work ethic that you hear about him and the endeavour that you hear about him is going to come forward and he's going to really work on what needs to be fixing. So, I mean, that's just my thing. I've seen a lot of negativity about the situation. I just feel that we're not there yet. We're not a playoff team. So let's just kind of, just relax a little bit. Let's relax.
I don't think you can't ever question the Zach pick because the alternatives just weren't there.
Yeah.
I think it's perfectly fair to question what he's shown so far in his rookie season. I think that's fair. But then I also, I said a couple of weeks ago, I do think he was completely overhyped. Not from where he's going to get to, but the expectation of where he would be at this point in his rookie season. I think some people
they all were
just too much.
I think they all were. This
yeah,
whole
but, I mean,
class,
Trevor
the
Lawrence,
whole class
Trevor Lawrence looks awful.
And I mean,
Like, he
even
looks
Justin
terrible.
Fields is like up and down. I mean, the whole class, I think, was really billed as you got these, 4 can't miss pro, 3 or 4 can't miss prospect, like really high class. And everyone thought, well, that automatically means they're all going to be Herberts, it doesn't. They could all get to a really good level, and I think a lot of them. I like what Justin. I think Justin Fields will be good. I do think Trevor Lawrence, once they get that whole mess sorted out down in Jacksonville, will eventually be good.
Urban Meyer.
I mean, that is just another story in one sense. But I think also Zach. I think there is a lot of potential with these players, but they all got to find the truth. They've all gone back to bad situations. All 3 of them have gone back to bad situations, and the guy with the lowest ceiling has gone to a fantastic situation where he's being completely carried by the team, and he's doing great. And that's Matt Jones. So I think it's just. Look, every QB's got their own trajectory. We just have to relax and just look at the positives going forward and what we have going forward, rather than kind of what is now. Because there's a lot of injuries, a lot of people out. So many, I know a lot of NFL teams have people out, but we also are missing. We're a team that didn't have a lot of talent to begin with. We had young players and minimal like top level talent, and we've lost most of that top level talent as well. Especially when Quinnen went out, I was like, oh great, here we are. He's out for the season. I thought when he went to the locker room, so
his shoulder. Yeah.
It was
I think if we're still having this conversation at the same point next season, then we can start to worry about it.
Yeah,
if we're still saying Zach Wilson's 0 to 10 yards completion rate is 60%, when most it's up at 85-90. Then we can start being a little bit concerned. But year 1 rookie season, it's just not the time to be worried dramatically about him. You can criticise him and say he should be doing better, but you shouldn't say he's never going to get there or I've seen enough. I saw a couple of people last night say I've seen enough. Like, let's move on and draft.
But that's the stuff I was seeing as well, and that's why I've come up with this big, this big speech I wanted to get. Just because I just saw so much people just being out on the kid now. I'm like, guys, I mean, I know we're tired of 10 years. Like, we're all tired of being terrible and our season being over, like, way before December. We're all exhausted by it. We know. But you got to understand, it is the first year for the head coach and the QB. You've got to give them their run. You can't pin all that crap on them. Like they have shown progression, I think, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. We've seen it with Mike LaFleur. I think overall Salah's done some better head coaching. He's become more comfortable in his head coaching duties as the season's gone on, and we hope for better as we go forward. Let's just relax.
He's getting very annoyed with the media then.
Oh yeah, and he's
post game
with Rich. Yeah, he got with Rich. I'm like, yeah,
which I thought was actually for Samini. That was actually a reasonable question. I thought it was actually quite a reasonable question. He really got his back up about it. I think he just said, we haven't seen tangible progress. What have you seen? Or and he was kind of like, I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to touch that one. And he kind of like, it's a strange one. I think it's because I think he does see because I think Salah's obviously right in there with all the players. I think he is seeing the progression, but it's just not translating enough to wins. I think the progression is there, but it's just not coming through with the consistency that's going to get you wins. So therefore, the media just sees you're still losing, so there's no progression. But he's seeing that the players individually, when you pick out a player and you look at the file, you're saying where was he and where is he now? I think a lot of players has done. I think he takes it personally because I think he's really invested in this team and he thinks it's a bit of a shot at them and their hard work. So I actually did support. I didn't think Salah was off for that. I do understand that it wasn't the worst from Rich. Rich has been way worse than that before. But I do understand why Salah was angry because it's almost like a shot at him and his players' effort for the months they've put in. So watching the game though, can you doubt it?
No, I get it. I get it both sides. It's not a bad question, but I also get why he's angry. So I do understand that because the game was really poor. But like I said, come on, guys. We're already a mid-level team with all our players. If we had every single player fit, including Carl Lawson, we would still be a kind of like middle-level quality team if everyone's healthy, maybe, around that level. And we've lost almost all our good players, generally. So we have to understand that, like, we just can't compete. We just can't compete. And so, I don't know. I'm not... The defense looked better. Do you return to the defense a little bit? Generally, they look better. I guess they were a bit more disciplined to try and stop the run, but it's still so poor in some aspects, and some of the effort of someone with number 21 specifically, he really got my back up.
It's strange for us to say their defense were better, was that
they weren't good.
Conceded 30 points and 340 yards and 200 rushing yards on the ground.
I know.
But I think it was a little bit easier for him because Taysom Hill just couldn't grab the football.
That's another thing.
His finger was just completely gone. It didn't look like he could even grip the football. He was overthrowing people, so you kind of knew it was either going to be a Taysom Hill keeper, a short pass, or Alvin Kamara was going to run all over you, and he did, and Taysom Hill did. But yeah, Ashton Davis. I mean, if PFF give him another high rating, I'm just going to cancel my membership.
I had to replay that play when Elijah Riley made a hustle play to get around the ankles of Taysom to try and stop him from getting the first down. And then Ashton Davis is just approaching it so tentatively, doesn't even try to stop him. Like, there wasn't even an attempt. He just hopped over him and just let him get the first down. Like, I know it's an awkward angle. I know you're not likely going to stop him because of his momentum, but hey, give it a go. It was very reminiscent of like that Jamal Adams one that we were all kind of laughing at a few weeks ago, where like, okay, you may not likely to stop him, but hey, throw yourself in there, try to make a difference. But I don't know. It just really he makes mistakes anyway. So then when you see the effort like that, he's making kind of sort of business decisions. It just pisses you off a bit more, you know.
Yeah, I think the defense is just it felt slow yesterday, didn't it, to the ball? Like there were a couple of plays where they were fast, but there was just no explosiveness. They just felt like they wanted to show up, get the game done, and get out of there, really, forfeit football. And I appreciate that they were put in some tough spots by the offense going 3 and out, and they had to be on the field for a long time for the second week in a row. But the reason they're on the field for a long time, week after week, is because they just let teams run all over them.
Mm-hmm.
They can't force a stop. They can occasionally get teams to 3rd and long, but once they get teams to 3rd and long and manage to stop 1 or 2 runs, then they give up a pass play or they give up a penalty, which gives the automatic first down. And it's relentless. And yesterday did look better, but I think, as David said, they were kind of put in a position where they could overcommit to stopping the run, and they were able to load the box up and try and force it. And yeah, they kept the game close for a while, but they're still so talent poor and can't force a turnover or a takeaway. Taysom Hill threw 4 interceptions the other week, didn't he?
Yeah.
And we didn't even look like we were getting 1. Something just to give us a spark. No, just something to give us a spark.
Yeah, he wasn't throwing the ball that much, was he? You know,
no,
because he couldn't. It was predictable, especially with his hand injury. You thought he's going to run the ball. Kamara, like you said, David, it was I guess the fact that they looked better because they were made to look better because the other offense once was a really poor outfit on the other side of the ball with basically one good player. So I think it was a false representation of any progress potentially. I just think it's more of the same, and like I said, I think that the effort level has always been there generally, but they've just made mistakes and they've just been poor. And so when you saw the effort level being low on certain players, that just adds a bit more. I think it's just we're in that season. We're in the end of the season now. Right? I think once all the injuries, like I said, we got people out for the season now. We're kind of, the record is what it is. I think that people are starting to check out a bit, and these are the people we got to start seeing. Okay, who's checked out? Who's still invested? Who's a guy who we want to move forward? Who's someone on the fringes that is not worth putting too much time investment in if they're not going to work hard even in this situation. I mean, I tell you something. I mean, we don't know how long we'll have him on because he's on such big money. But CJ Mosley you tell the effort was there for him for sure.
Yeah, I don't think CJ's ever going to not give effort, is it? It's just not in his DNA to bail out of tackles. But I think the point Matt made about the lack of interceptions is actually a really key one, because you look at what Mac Jones is doing in New England, and I haven't looked at the average start position for their drives, but I think they've had 19 interceptions. So their defense is constantly flipping that field position for their offense, and that's just something that we haven't really been able to do. I mean,
it's another thing, isn't it, for Mac?
Berrios had the kickoff. Berrios had the kickoff, and that put us in a position, and lo and behold, we got a touchdown. That's momentum. Then we get 2 touchdowns. We don't really have that momentum shifting capability at the minute. For as good as Bryce Hall is, and he is probably the bright spot on this, the entire defense, because he's in the second year and he's playing at quite a high clip. He's not a ball hawk. He's not he's not going to be one of those guys that turn the field for you. So
No.
I think that is something we need to focus on in the offseason, is
Fantastic
getting
number
some
two.
players in there.
Fantastic number two. If you're saying,
Fantastic number two.
because if he's the guy who's going to be targeted, because we do have a ball hawk on the other side, and Bryce Hall is targeted against the other team's number two, that's a really successful position to be in, where if you've got someone if they're going away from their number one receiver because you've got a ball hawk there, your number one cornerback, and they're going towards Bryce Hall against their number two, that's fantastic. So if we can sort that position out, as we've said for quite a few times.
It also means you can shift your safety over and shade your safety that way. We're not getting anything out of that position either.
The fact that he's there
safety
is really encouraging in terms of team building. It really shows if you can get that one cornerback sorted out. I know it's it's easier to say than just getting that top level quarterback, but if you can get someone who's got that high ability, which obviously can bring us in terms of when we get to the off season, we'll talk about options, free agency, or the draft. But yeah, I think
the thing on cornerbacks quickly is I'm not convinced for this system you need your traditional CB1 in the sense that you need a Jalen Ramsey, a Stephon Gilmore, a pure lockdown cornerback because of the system where you often drop them and you kind of get them to fill the space. I think getting another player at Bryce Hall's level, just so you can balance the field a bit more and kind of not be forced to over coverage on one side as they're having to do at the moment because they're so worried about giving up plays against Jason Pinnock and Isaiah Dunn and kind of loading one side. If you can kind of get to a position where you've got 2 or 3 really good CB2s, and I think they're almost there because Michael Carter II's come on really nicely in that slot position. He's been a great find this season. You've got Bryce Hall on one side, and I think if you can find one more piece, and then you obviously have people like Jason Pinnock, Eccles in behind them, you kind of start filling out the field that way. And obviously it's nice to have a Jalen Ramsey, a Stephon Gilmore, Patrick Surtain, but I'm not convinced it needs to be that CB1 quality, just when we go back to the labelling it. And then on that Bryce Hall point, I think that is his homework for the off-season, is practicing when he's forcing receivers wide, is to practice getting his head back to the ball. Because when you watch him, he's a bit slow getting his head around. He's so focused on the receiver's hands that he doesn't quite get his head back to the ball. So we'd like to see him kind of work and improve on that. And I think if he's able to do that, maybe 1 or 2 interceptions will start coming his way because he is a very good cover corner and he stays sticky. We'd just like to see him start making those plays.
I mean, I guess in the scheme, the pressure up front causes a QB to speed things up, which creates the turnovers. So like that's the hope. That's the hope that's how it kind of works out, rather than having.
I think safety is really important as well, isn't it? We don't talk about safety a lot when we talk about secondary, but for this system, the safety is actually very important. Look at what they had in San Francisco, and when they were in Seattle, look what they had in Seattle. Like, safety is actually a much more important factor in this scheme than a lot of people give it credit for.
Even more so than cornerback in some ways, right? In terms of
to a point, and we're just not getting that production.
No,
you don't want to bag on Ashton Davis too much, but he kind of does the bare minimum. So he's always there just slightly too late. So he can make the tackle, so he's not going to give it up. Well, he didn't make the tackle yesterday on Taysom Hill when he went down the sideline. But, we're just not getting production out of that. And losing Marcus May was big. Losing LaMarcus Joyner was big. And we often talk about Carl Lawson's loss, but losing LaMarcus Joyner when he was going back to his normal safety position next to Marcus May, I think that's a much bigger loss than people give it credit for, because the back end is they were relying on that experience and that quality with those two positions to almost make up for the youth of the cornerback unit.
Yeah.
So a lot hasn't gone our way this year, and we have to kind of think about it. But, is Marcus May coming off an Achilles injury? Is that the right move for next year to bring him back? Is LaMarcus Joyner going to come back? Because I think he was on a 1-year deal. So,
we'll see.
We're still no closer to figuring out what we have at safety, because Ashton Davis isn't showing me enough to go, I feel comfortable having Ashton Davis in there next year. And as nice a story as Elijah Riley is, I'm not sure I'm comfortable saying he's our starting strong safety next year.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it could be a Carl Hamilton in the first if we get other business sorted out in free agency. Safety might be our kind of glaring need that we could really top out there. We just don't know at this point. We could get.
Twitter will have a meltdown if that happens.
Huh?
Twitter will have an absolute meltdown if that happens.
Yeah, I'm not ready for Carl Hamilton.
No, I get it.
He's a fantastic player. Yeah. He's a fantastic player. But I just don't know if I'll be able to deal with it.
Well, like I said, it all depends on what happens in free agency and plays out, and these things can shift now to the draft and everything changing. So we'll have to see about that. As we're sticking on draft prospects, we'll move on to our new weekly segment, which I'm naming "It's Getting Drafty" in here, where we're going to just list a couple of draft prospects. Some in the first round, some late from the second round onwards in a certain position group. So we've got something to look forward to into what should be a pretty promising offseason. So this week, wide receiver, I think it's been quite a common thing, that the discussion being online. So where are we at wide receiver? David, what's your first round receiver that you want to highlight?
I think I'm going to go with Jameson Williams. I think everyone knows his name now after his performance against Georgia, which was absolutely outstanding. I think, I know DJ is absolutely all over Jameson Williams. I think he sends a tweet once every 48 hours to beg the Jets to draft him. Williams just quite an interesting one because he was at Ohio State and then obviously transferred to Alabama. He couldn't really break through the receiver room at Ohio State, which, it's not overly surprising when you kind of look at the quality that they do have, but it's surprising when you see him at Alabama doing what he's doing currently. But he's playing with obviously the Heisman winner in Bryce Young, so he's got a great quarterback. Alabama are in a position where they tend to have the best receivers, the best quarterback, the best offensive lineman. But he's got that speed, and I think it's that speed and that yard after catch ability that we maybe have with Elijah Moore, but don't have a massive amount outside of that. So he could stretch the field, but he can do it from inside or out, which is why
he's also bigger, isn't he? He's a taller receiver as well. But
he's a taller. I don't know how tall he is, but he is a taller receiver.
So that's kind of, you got like the Elijah Moore explosion, but you've got the height as well as it, which can be quite useful as well from what I've seen. Matt, what's your feelings about Jameson Williams?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Jameson Williams. I think he's got that speed, but it's kind of the ability to be clever with his routes, to use his speed, is what makes him so exciting. I think he's very clever at lulling defenders into a half a step, and then once he explodes, you're not catching him. And he's kind of the player that you can use all over the offense. A bit like the player that I wanted to highlight here, and this is going back to Jameson Williams' former hunting ground of Ohio State, and talking about Garrett Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
I think Garrett probably projects more as a pure slot receiver at the NFL. I think his short area speed, his quickness over those first 5-10 yards, and ability to explode out of the top of his breaks with really crisp, really clean route running, really projects him well to being over the middle of the field. I think you can probably use him in a similar way almost to how the Jets have started using Elijah Moore, in terms of he's very, very good in that intermediate short horizontal offense. He's able to break any play, and he's got touchdown potential written over any time you get the ball in his hands. But he does have the ability and is very capable of taking it vertically when he needs to. So he's another chess piece that the Jets could get in their offense. And I think pairing someone like Garrett Wilson with Elijah Moore just unlocks a whole load of different looks that you could really exploit. Ohio have used him kind of as a jet sweep guy, as an underneath guy, out of the backfield guy, and that kind of just opens up so much for the offense. So I think both Jameson Williams, Garrett Wilson in that first round, depending on where Seattle's pick ends up, because obviously they've bounced off a couple of wins at the moment. I think they're 2-0 over the last 2 weeks, unfortunately. Yeah. But I think that could be a nice spot for either of these guys, and it's kind of feels like a pretty good position to be in, choosing between the two of them.
Yeah, it seems to be there's some good options there, and I think if we do go that way, if we go elsewhere in free agency, a wide receiver at the top of the draft could be it, with especially that second first round pick, Seattle's one, in the kind of 10 to 15 range, which it probably will end up being, even if it's not there now.
One more name onto. I'm going to be sneaky here. This is super quick. I'm going to stick one more name in because I've.
Which is that a first round talent again?
First round talent is Drake London.
Drake London, okay.
And so this is an interesting one for me because I have Drake London early in the season ranked as wide receiver 1, but I have more questions about him than any of the others for the Jets. He's a slightly bigger bodied receiver. He kind of relies on his go up and get it ability, and I think although he's a great talent and someone we should watch out for, you do wonder if the Jets are going to steer away from someone like him based on how we've seen them use Mims this season and how effective someone like Elijah Moore has been. So just throwing that question out into the ether so people can think about it.
David,
digest it.
You got any thoughts about Wilson and London?
Well, I think Matt's been pretty cheeky there, throwing in 2 first rounders. I wasn't allowed 2 first rounders, so yeah. I mean, both of them. It's a good receiver class, so both of them are interesting prospects. I think Matt's hit it with Drake London. He's probably a bit more one-dimensional than the other guys, but he's also a very good contested catcher, and that's something we probably haven't seen a massive amount of on the Jets this season in terms of receivers coming down with contested catches and helping their quarterback out. So sometimes with the way that Zach Wilson plays, having someone that can do that, I think he's at about 70% success in terms of contested catches. So, that's a benefit. But I think between the two, I would go with Wilson just because, like Matt said, he is another chess piece. You move him around, he can play inside and out. He can beat you in a few different ways. For this kind of horizontal passing attack, you want guys who have good yard after catch ability. So, I like all of them. I like Olave as well. I think he's a good player. See, I snuck one in. So there's plenty of options. If the Jets want to go wide receiver in round 1, there's 4 or 5 guys that could feasibly fulfill a certain role on this offense. So absolutely, I like them both. There's not one of them. I'd like Wilson over London though, personally.
Right. Okay. Just before we move on to our round 2 plus prospects, I just remembered that we didn't even mention Denzel and the whole thing. And you mentioned Drake London and what he can do, and you're thinking Denzel, and I think it was on purpose. I think we focused on Zach, and we thought let's just move on from there. Let's just forget about it. I think it wasn't great from Denzel, obviously, and he got yanked after those 2 mistakes. We'll see what I think he's going to be needed as a body out there. With just the lack of options we've got, so he's going to have other opportunities to kind of make up for it.
Salah said he'll be back next week.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just see what happens. But at this point, it ain't looking good. It ain't looking good for Denzel. And
do you know what annoyed me most about Denzel Williams? Just quickly, he didn't look bothered. Like, he didn't look that bothered. Like, I watched him a couple of times, even before the penalties, like coming out on his routes, and it was slow. It was, he's better than what he's showing right now, and I think that's a really frustrating. When we are so devoid of talent on the field at this point, that was the perfect opportunity for Denzel Mims to go out and prove a point, make a statement.
You would want him to.
He didn't look that bothered.
You would want him to say, "This is my chance."
Everyone's pulling for him.
Yeah,
everyone's pulling for him.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was a big letdown yesterday.
We'll see what happens in Miami and going forward with Denzel. So if we head over to our round 2 prospects, Matt, do you want to throw your round 2 plus prospect out there at wide receiver?
Sure. So I'm going for someone who I'm having a hard time, to be honest, grading him where he's going to go in the draft. And I think he'll probably end up settling in around probably a late second to mid-third round kind of talent. So in that kind of 50 to 75 range on a big board. And it's Zay Flowers out of Boston College. And I think what makes him so exciting, and perhaps more than any wide receiver in this class, is his versatility. He is as versatile as they come. Boston have used him in the backfield. He's had carries out of the backfield, kind of like we've seen San Francisco do with Deebo Samuel, but they've used him in the slot. They've used him out wide. They've flexed him. And the reason they've done this is simply he is fast. He is absolutely rapid. The man has wheels for legs. Once he gets going, you have to be pretty rapid to try and keep up with him. And he's got this kind of big playability, which Boston do a really nice job in terms of manufacturing touches horizontally and vertically kind of down the field, which really opens up their whole entire offense. I think he's kind of the type of player that has a pretty smooth release off the line of scrimmage. He kind of gets going. He's extremely smooth in his routes, and he just kind of catches your eye every time you watch him take the field. I think some of the things that might hold him back is he is smaller. He's listed at 5'11" by Boston College, although we know that colleges sometimes exaggerate their height. So it'll be really interesting to see when he comes out and does the combine, how does he measure up? Because I think that could have a big impact on his draft status. But he's a really interesting, exciting, explosive player that I think you can have a lot of fun with on Sundays and kind of watch him be a dynamic piece of your offense.
Yeah, these options in the kind of that second, third, fourth round guys could be really effective pieces to complement the offense. Like say Michael Carter, we got that value there. We could get similar value in the wide receiver position and go elsewhere, which we might have to, depending on what happens in free agency. And with the defensive issues we have and other issues elsewhere, it's good to know these later round prospects. David, what's your prospect that we could go in day 2+?
So I'm gonna go with a guy called Jereth Stearns. So he's a Western Kentucky player, probably the most productive college receiver this year. So he's had, I think, 1,700 yards, 14 touchdowns. So, what I like about he is going to be an exclusively, probably exclusively slot receiver. He's only 5'9". He's under 200 pounds, which some people may have a real problem with. But he run 93% out of the slot in Western Kentucky. And he's just a guy that will beat you in so many different ways. Once you get the ball in his hands, he's not got lightning speed, but he has just got this real knack for his route running. He gets open, he gets separation. He's got some of the most reliable hands in college football. He's had 3 drops on 169 targets. So that kind of shows you, I think that's a 2.2% drop rate, which is ridiculous. That's better than Jameson Williams. That's better than Garrett Wilson. That's better than pretty much everyone in college football who's been a part of their offense as much as he has. Because he was at Houston Baptist with Bailey Zapp, who was the quarterback who he now plays with in Western Kentucky. So they kind of came as a package deal, along with the offensive coordinator, whose name I can't remember now, but they all came together to Western Kentucky. And I think that continuity has really helped them, because you can tell there's that obvious trust. And he's quite a stocky guy, so he goes over the middle quite a lot, and he's not afraid to get hit. He's not afraid of contact. He's just a really solid receiver. He's just kind of everything you kind of look at him in terms of kind of his route running ability, his timing, where he knows exactly where to sit down in zones. Just kind of one of those receivers who just knows how to play the position. And I think that comes from all his brothers play football. I think he's got 3 brothers, all of them play football. One of them, Caden Stearns, was a safety at Texas. He's now at Denver. So football's kind of in their DNA. It's what they do. And he's just been fantastic. Yeah, like every time you put on the tape, you can pick. It doesn't matter which game you put on, you will see number 8 making plays all over the field. I mean, it doesn't matter. He doesn't have that off game. He doesn't have that kind of couple of weeks where it doesn't work. He will find a way to beat you. And he's just a really interesting. I don't know where he's going to go, because his size is something that I think some teams will look down on. And I think the fact that he will probably need to play exclusive out of the slot, some teams won't draft that high either, because they like that inside-out kind of ability. But I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the 3rd round, top of the 3rd round. I wouldn't be surprised at all, just because that production's not stat padding at college. Some receivers, kind of Pumphrey was one of them. You stat pad in college. I don't see it like that with him, because of how crisp he is in terms of his route running and how safe he is in terms of his hands. So some team's going to get a good player, I think, in Jereth Stearns.
Seems like a very good NFL kind of like player. Do a good job for someone in the in the mid rounds coming through. A bit like what do you think? He's a bit like a Randall Cobb type, early career Randall Cobb. Would you say something like that?
Yeah, he's probably a bit stockier than Randall Cobb.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, I mean the reliability aspect is there.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking
when you're describing
him,
it sounded a bit like Randall Cobb, like early career Randall Cobb to me. So it's just
that
was the picture.
Jameson Crowder may not be here for that long.
It could be. Yeah.
So if you need a replacement inside the slot, and you need, which is quite fitting, and one of the reasons I chose him today was with what we saw yesterday in terms of the amount of drops and issues. If you need that safety blanket, that reliability,
someone getting open as well,
is absolutely someone that can do that.
Yeah.
So that 1,000 yards after contact was just a stat that just literally jumped off the page and smacked me in the face, because that's 300 more than I think any other receiver in college. So it's not just he was the best; he was the best by a considerable margin in that regard, at least.
Great. Well, there's some names to look out for as we head into the off season in a few weeks, and we start comparing options in free agency versus the draft, early draft, later draft. So it's all good to know some of these names and start researching, looking at film, look at some highlights, just get yourself familiar with some potential players who could be coming in. So, guys, it's been a rough week. It was a rough day at the office yesterday, but we truck on, we move on. We hope for some better performances, some highlights to look forward to, some maybe improvements from certain people wearing number 11, and maybe 21 as well. Maybe he can redeem himself at the end of the season. I don't know. But yeah, it is what it is. So, guys, again, all the kind of input, comments, everything's great that we'd like to hear from you guys. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Jets UK Pod. You can follow our YouTube channel, subscribe to that, like the videos. That's our video version of the podcast. David's got his work at the Jets Way. Follow that. It's great work every day coming through his newsletter. So let's keep on. He puts in really interesting articles, especially those midweek articles. So there's some interesting concepts coming through from David. So guys, thanks for joining me. David, Matt, is there anything you want to say to the listeners before we head off?
Let's just hope next week's a little bit better.
I should probably queue you up one at a time.
Too early for Christmas, right? Too early for Christmas, Matt. We're going to speak to him before Christmas.
I think we're going to see him one time before Christmas, aren't we? Or is it? Yeah, something like that. Maybe another time, a few times before Christmas. But anyway, I know Chris, he just wants to fast forward the season, Matt. So I think for that, we'll fast forward to the end of this episode, and we'll see you next week. We'll be speaking to our friend Lee from the Dolphins again, preparing for them coming off their bye, off a bunch of wins. I think it's 5 wins and then into their bye. So they're in a really good spot right now. Dolphins going to be a difficult opponent next week. We'll be speaking with them in the preview. So enjoy the week. Let's recuperate. Let's get ready for next week, and we'll catch you next time.